Good morning. Here we are, Vav Tishrei, the site of our Rebbe Simchana. Gadol Torah shemevi refuah la kol bria. Great is Torah because it gives healing to all, and it's not the kol bria, it actually is the kol chaya. It gives healing to all life. Who needs refuah?
Baruch ben Yamin ben Rachel Blima, Yehudas Golda Basilis Hana, Chaim Yaakov Zev ben Sarah, Yosef Yitzhak ben Lior, Shoshana Bas Hana, Gary Robert, son of George, Ron Avraham ben Hayalata, Yaakov Shaol ben Hana Miriam, and Yehudit Gila Bas Rachel Leah.
Refuah shlem according to all of them.
Amen. Thank you.
Refuah shlema to Rabbi Ginsburg. He's getting along and he should get better and better. Rabbi Yitzhak Feivish ben Brian Malka, they'll have a refuah shlema. Anybody else? Okay, Hayom Yom. Vav Tishrei, we're in the middle of the explanation of the word tshuva, according to the method of Rav Zusha, who took each word, Taf, Shun, Vav, etc., to tshuva, and he found something to say about each letter. So we're on the third letter, Vav. So the Vav. The Havta l'reacha kamoicha. Tshuva involves loving your friend as yourself. As the Alter Rebbe declared, I'm reading now inside, that this love is an instrument. This love of a fellow Jew, loving your fellow as yourself, is an instrument, a means to love the eternal God. Why? Because this is explained in the statement. Whoever is pleasing to man is pleasing to God. This service of Shuvah stems from goodness of heart. So Avis Yisrael, we know it's a form of Shuvah. What do I mean by that? It's often difficult, or put it this way, there are situations, even with those with whom we love, or maybe especially with whom we love, where it is difficult. And overcoming that difficulty to create union, that's a model for the whole Torah mitzvah system. Overcoming the darkness, the separation, to bring unity, which of course is the theme of what we've been speaking about and will continue to speak in Tanya today. Lessons in Tanya, Geras HaKodesh, page 386, the bottom of page 386 is where we're holding. We're holding by yesterday, by the way, Hey, and we're going to do Emir Hashem, Hey, and Vav today. The previous 2 days, you remember we had a glitch yesterday. Those are on the YouTube channel. Everything goes to the YouTube channel. So, of course, if you miss it and have an interest in it and the time, you can find it there. Okay, in the Tanya, in the Likutei Amorim, this is on page Kuf Lamed Aleph, counting down from the top of the page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down over on the right, Ubezeh Yuvin. This will be understood. Now, I gave a fairly lengthy preface to all of this in the class that I recorded last night. The Kitzer, in a short way, there's a lot of Kabbalistic vocabulary here. However, it all boils down to Yesh Me'ayin. How something, which is called a Yesh, we call it Yesh, there it is, Yesh, there it is, something you can touch, feel, see, eat, ingest, etc. How that Yesh ultimately derives from something which has a totally, if I negated every word I just said, touch, feel, eat, sense, etc., negated all that, you'd be left with the source of everything about which you can say nothing. And therefore, it's called something, the yesh, the substantial, from nothing. Okay? And what we're doing here, what the Alter Rebbe is doing here, is ultimately giving us the sense, and this is the sense that we want to walk away with, the sense that the mitzvahs, which are the bottom of the heap of all this, fulfill the short expression that comes from Sefer Yetzirah, that the beginning, the ayin, is wedged in the yesh. In other words, God himself, the essence of God, as he says, Anoichi, the first word of the giving of the Ten Commandments, my very self, I have invested in the mitzvahs. And what we're doing here in general in the section is discussing the process, all right? So where we are in the process is as follows, and I will start. V'hine, not v'hine, u'bezeh yuvin, and with this that I've just said will be understood, kiyas ha-mitzvahs b'malchus, how it is that the mitzvahs are in malchus. Now remember, mitzvahs express God's will, right? This is what God wants. And we've learned in earlier parts of Tanya that the will is associated with the level called Kesser, which is the crown. And in yesterday's Tanya, the Alter Rebbe used the mashal of the development of the human from the seminal drop to a full-born, birthed, full-fledged human being. So the crown is, in our anatomy, the skull. The skull is just a bone, isn't it? Meaning it doesn't look like anything much. It's just knock on wood, as they say, right? But it's emblematic of the crown, which also has no differentiation in it. It's a mass which is associated with the ayin. But this crown, this skull, is attached to, or inside the skull, is something very soft and very tangible and very differentiated, which is the brain, with all of its contours and all of its chambers. So this ultimate simplicity, right, interfaces with the beginning of complexity, which is the brain, right? So the mitzvahs arise up in the crown, this is what God wants. From his essence comes a will, and that's the crown. And from the will comes the enunciation or the thought of what he wants to bring into being. So, that he is ha-mitzvahs v'malchus. Why the mitzvahs are in malchus? Because there has to be the descent from the will into action. And action, in yesterday's Tanya, the action goes through is the birth, right? The birth. So in a metaphor, this seminal drop, which is the first instantiation of something which contains, in conjunction with the egg, everything which is ever going to be in this physiology of the body, is in a very, very teeny, very, very contracted way. But the goal of that is, of course, the baby, which the baby is born from the womb. The womb is Malchus, and the baby being born from the womb is analogous to God's simple will being expressed in the mitzvahs, which are born from, or which are revealed in Malchus, which is God's kingship or regnancy, because it's both male and female regnancy, rulership, and kinglyship, regency. That's regency is when, or regnance is when God manifests his will over the kingdom. So this Malchus, now we take the name Havaya, Yud K Vav K, the last letter, the He, which has height and breadth, it has shape, right? It has breadth and width. That's the idea of that seminal drop of the Yud having exposed itself now in a developmental stage into something big, broad, tangible. So that's the He of the Shem Havaya, the second He of the Shem Havaya. I'm back inside. That's the He of the Shem Havaya. The HaTorah Bezor. So the mitzvahs, right, they're the thing that God wants. That's the birth that he wants. And the Torah, of course, is what's containing the mitzvahs. So that's a step backwards, right? The Torah is the vehicle for the expression of the mitzvahs. So the Torah, if the mitzvahs are expressed in Malchus, So the Torah precedes it. That's Zoh. That's the impregnation from Chesed all the way down to Yesod of the seminal drop, which gives rise to the expansion and the development and the ultimate birth of the mitzvahs. So the Torah is in Zoh. You have Zoh and Malchus. Predecessor is Zoh, the seminal drop as it expands and goes down and down the channel, so to speak, and winds up, of course, on the way down in combination with the egg, and then down and down until it develops in the womb. So the Torah is the upper, is the vehicle, and the outcome, which is the mitzvahs. But the mitzvahs, as we'll now have to come back to remember, they're rooted much higher. They're rooted in God's will and even higher than God's will. So the Torah is in Zoh, that's the Midos, and then Malchus, it gives birth to the mitzvahs. As the Torah is the Vav, 6 mitzvahs, right? Hesed through Yesod, 6 mitzvahs, that's the Vav. The Vav is the letter 6, that's the bringing down. And that's the letter Vav of the Shem Havaya, and the Hey is the birth, the womb. Agam Shelamayla, even though, so mitzvahs are born from the womb, which is the bottom of this process. Agam Shelamayla, even though upstairs, meaning in the deeper levels of Hashem, the Arach Anpin, which is a Kabbalistic word for a part of the crown, in Arach Anpin, ha-mitzvahs hen begalgalta. The mitzvahs, their source is in the skull, in the Kesser, in God's will. Belovnius, in the white, it's called the whiteness. Hi ha'urcha de palguta. It's the path of separation. So from absolute singularity, in the absolute singularity is contained the potential. One of the expressions is roughly equivalent. There are 4 expressions. I'll just put them on the table that are brought in Sefer Ayin Beis that are roughly equivalent to each other. We've been talking about Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing. In other words, is Koyach HaPoel, the power to bring something into existence. The power, you don't see the power, but the power is necessary. It's the point of emanation, the point of radiation, which is going to become something much broader. So where is that space? That's the white space, right? Which is in the skull, which is the palukta, which begins the path of separation. The sari the peskalga l'tariag urchin. It's connected in a mushal. He uses a mushal here, which is from Kabbalah, with the hairs. The hairs on top of the head, right? Hairs on top of the head. Interesting mushal for another. What's the interesting that we haven't really talked about before? The hairs are very differentiated, but they have no feeling, right? You can cut them, no problem. So there you see two things opposite. On the one hand, it's beyond, deeper than having any sensation. Sensation is much lower, right, when you get into the nervous system. But at the same time, you can see the separation. So the separation will be the mitzvahs, but the mitzvahs have to travel from that initial state of conception where they have no body, right? They're just like hairs, but they have the potential for separation, which you even see if you look at the top of the head. That hair, the separation of the hairs is an indication of the potential of that coming down with a feeling at the lower levels to the 613 major roots of the mitzvahs, the Tariag Orkin, down through the 613 paths. The Araisa, and the 613 paths are the Torah. The Torah is the vehicle, excuse me, for bringing from that state of no feeling or ayin or no thingness into actuality. And that comes through the intermediary. From head to toe is the intermediary of the heart, which is Zoh, the Midos. Back inside. The Shoresh Torah, the Nafke Mechochma Elah, and the proximate root of the Torah, which is Chochma Elah, the first part of the brain, the right part of the brain. Where does that come from? The brain. The brain comes from now we're intellectualizing, conceptualizing, bringing to conscious. That comes from a pre-conscious state, which is called in the nomenclature of Kabbalah, the hidden brains that exist in the crown. Again, this is the technical language. Of course, it's important, but the more important is that the translation or understanding of this technical language. We have a place called the skull, which is the source of everything. It manifests first in a singular point in Chokmah, right? But before it manifests, it's there, but in a hidden dimension, which is another expression in Ayin Beis, roughly equivalent to Yesh Me'ayin, which is Etzem Behispastus. There's an essence, which is untouchable, unknowable, and through this process, it spreads itself out. Or another explanation is Gili Ahelim, revelation from concealment. Everything is concealed up in the skull. You don't know, it doesn't show the Kesser, the crown. And it comes down, the process of coming down is called revelation. And this process goes through stages. And Arach Anpin is a level in the Kesser, which is part of the process. And then it comes down and interfaces into Chokmah, etc., etc. And this Chokmah, this wisdom, is conveyed in the Torah, which the Torah gives the reasons for the mitzvahs. They may not be explicit, they may be hidden in Kabbalistic understanding, but the reason, in other words, the root of the mitzvah, you don't see. It's like, take a mashal of a flower. Its root in the ground. You don't see its rootedness in the ground. You're really not, when you go buy flowers, you're not really interested in the root from whence it came. But if it weren't for that root, there would be no flower. So similarly, our interest, and God wants our total focus to be on the mitzvahs. But if you don't learn Torah, number one, you don't know how to do the mitzvahs correctly. And two, you're not in touch with the source of everything. So you're not getting the feel of the hiddenness which gives rise to revealness. Again, Gili Milahel, revelation from concealment. Okay, but we're going to look at the mitzvahs in another mashal that's brought in lots of times in Chassidus, like a signet ring, like the stamp of a signet ring on a piece of wax. The king would give his impression, right, on a letter in the old days, melt some wax and put a signet, and it had the seal of the king. So imagine a signet ring where all the points are, you don't see the points until you press it into the wax. And once you see the wax, that's where you see the impression. So similarly, the ayin shows nothing of what potential it has. It's another roughly equivalent to Yesh Me'ayin, is Koyach HaPoel, the potential which gives rise to the actual. So you don't see anything in the signet ring, but when you press it into the wax, that's when everything emerges. So that's also a mashal for roughly equivalent to Yesh Me'ayin, where everything is there, but in a totally invisible way. So that's the mashal of the signet ring. Amishapek, which transforms. It takes the hidden, which is Helam, and makes it Gili, and makes it revealed. This is also expressed in the language from Sefer Yetzirah, Noitz Techilas and Basoifa. The beginning is wedged in the end. In other words, the beginning that you don't see, the ayin, where do you see it? In the end, what's the end? The mitzvahs. If you want to know what God's will is, you can't see into his will, into his crown, but you can see its expression in the mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs are the lowest. Right? That's the physical stuff. The Torah is the intellectual and spiritual base of it. And then the crown is the invisible source of everything. So Hukoyacha Enso Boruchu. Now this, why he's telling us this, all this language is to tell us this, that there's the power of the infinite, of the creator, to create Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing. And that power of the infinite, the ineffable, the untangible, is resident in everything, to create Yesh Me'ayin. This is not a cause and effect relationship. A cause and effect, you can see the cause, and it has an effect. Here, the invisible is giving rise to the visible, the intangible giving rise to the tangible. In the cause and effect relationship, and the effect is encompassed by the cause. And the effect gives way to the cause. Right? If I take this pen and throw it, why did it land over here? Because there was a power, a koya, that was put into that, and that thing moved. So the cause was my hand pushing it, and the effect was the fall. But in the yesh me'ayin relationship, the effect has no visibility into its cause. The thing appears to be something totally separate, me'elakus, from godliness. And this is the process in which Hashem becomes king over all the separate beings. In his crown is invisibly invested the power to come all the way through all the levels until there's a kingdom that the king and queen rule over. And in our analog, how do we do that? We manifest what's manifest in what's in the crown is manifest in the fulfillment of the mitzvahs, that the king commands the people. We have this expression we say Friday night: the end of deed was first in thought. That's another way of looking at this. That primary is invisible, and what's the result of that? What you do see is the tangible. Point being always that the infinite is lodged in every detail of the finite. Therefore, it says in Yerushalmi, in the Gemara, didn't Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, didn't he separate from his learning in order to do the lulav? Of course he did. Okay, because I mean, there's a whole story here, but I don't have time to go into it. Just we'll leave with that. That he did. He was a not only a Talmud Chacham, but he was the originator of the exposition and the elucidation of Kabbalah. So his head and he and Rabbi Eliezer, his son, were involved all the time in learning. But did they not interrupt their learning to do a lulav? Yes, because of the following. We've heard this following expression before. Anyone who learns and doesn't do, it will be better that his afterbirth be turned on his face. Another way of saying it was better that he should be born. But why does it say it this way? That his afterbirth should be turned on his face? Because the afterbirth, though it comes out after, right, is the original container of the chayas, the life force, which gives rise to the embryo. So again, the beginning, the afterbirth, the beginning is wedged in the end. It's the beginning of the transition of the life force into the development of the embryo. I'm not sure. I've heard it pronounced very different way. Shliya, Shilya. This afterbirth, is formed first. Again, what's first in creation, what's first in thought is last in deed. So it's the beginning. It's formed for hatipa from the seminal drop. And this shilya was the main source of life for the embryo at the beginning until mem yom, until 40 days. The lesson in the development of the embryo. The life force is actually coming from what's going to be called the afterbirth until 40 days. So it's the beginning of the offspring. So hopefully this is a very simple mashal, right? That the beginning is wedged in the end. The beginning, which is going to be the afterbirth, that's the start of everything. And you won't see the afterbirth will be thrown away, and you'll see, and God willing, to have for a nice period of time this lovely new baby. But it began very deep in something that's, in this regard, inconsequential, but hugely consequential in terms of the beginning of it all. So similarly, the mitzvahs, again, which you see last, right? They come out loud. They're the end game of the whole thing is the mitzvahs. And ikar Torah v'shorsha. They are the root of the Torah. And they're the root of the Torah. V'hagam shehamitzvahs hu gufnias. Even though the mitzvahs are physical, the HaTorah is chokhmah, and the Torah is ethereal. It's wisdom. This, if you're looking at the mitzvahs are the externality of tangibility and externality of something which precedes it, which has no tangibility. Again, back to the root of it all, yesh me'ayin. And that which is ineffable, which is intangible, is the root of everything, and it's the panemius, the innermost part of everything, as will be explained. That's yesterday's. Today's Tanya begins. Similarly, flipping the page to 262, from the intimate relationship between the midos, Hesed and Yesod, and Malchus, the feminine, the masculine and feminine, through that process, there's created from nothing, which we now hopefully know doesn't mean zero. It means it's nothing tangible, right? Something which is very tangible. Something undifferentiated gives rise to something totally differentiated, and that's the process called yesh me'ayin. So similarly, from the relationship now in the spiritual terms of the midos of Hashem with Malchus of Hashem, that gives rise to something from nothing, and that something is kol hanivroim v'noistin v'nasim. These are all the creatures in Bria, Nivroim, and in Yetzirah, Noisrim, and in the world of Asiya, in the three lower worlds. Al Yedei or Haneshama, through the light, the fusion of light, the relatively immaterial but high energy, which we call light, the light of the neshama shabasoichen, which is within each and every world, has neshama, a spiritual part, which was within it. Now, in the spiritual worlds, you can't talk spiritual and physical. Let's talk essential and beyond and external, or let's the other word, panemius, internal and external. So everything has an internality, which is the neshama of the thing, and an externality, which is the manifestation of the thing. So everything has a neshama within it. Shehi elakus, and this neshama, which is in everything, including our neshama, is godly. It's from God. It's elakus. And it comes, if you want to know a little bit about its development, it comes from the lights invested in the vessels as the other. The lights are very rarefied things, but without the lights, there's no effect. However, if the lights, if you have energy alone without a container, there's also no effect. So you need an ayin, a relatively ephemeral something, which is the root of it all, has to be put in something less ephemeral, which is a vessel. So this is elakus, godliness, which comes initially from the kelim, the vessels of the Yud spheres of Malchus of Atzilus. Malchus of Atzilus is where we usually identify the first so-called real instance of something, because Malchus of Atzilus is going to give rise to the Keser of Bria, and Bria means creation, right? So from the relatively ephemeral Atzilus, it's Malchus, which is the bottom of it all, the most non-ephemeral of the ephemeral, comes something tangible, which is called Bria. Malchus of Atzilus gives rise to Bria. V'gam b'soichai, and within Malchus of Atzilus, now we're working our way up, within it is the Oros HaKav de the Or Ein Sof, is the light of the beam of the original beam of light, of the infinite light, of the light of the infinite one, Hamalubish B'Atzilus, which is enclosed in Atzilus. And this light comes down and down and down, Arpasa, until a curtain. This is another metaphor. Between Atzilus and Bria, we call it a curtain, right? And we call it a curtain and there are various, there's a wall. You think about the difference between a wall and a curtain. A wall doesn't let anything come through from the other side. A parsa, a curtain, does let things come through from the other side. It gives you some visibility into the other side. So from infinity to Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, there's virtually no thinning out, no darkness, no concealment, virtually. I mean, there is a bit, but nevertheless, the beings in Atzilus, which are emanated, that's the word Atzilus, have they have an open conscious of awareness of godliness. When you get to Bria, the curtain gets a little bit thicker. So there's, in Atzilus, so the light comes down in Atzilus, ad parsa, until the curtain, the ha'oras hakav, and a illumination from the kav. You have this strong beam, and now it's going through a curtain, so it's going to be diffused a little. Shoyamer bekelim the yud sfiras the malchus, and that light, as it gets diffused in the kalim, the vessels of the 10 spheres, and come into malchus, that's baka haparsa. That light breaks through the curtain from above to below. That light, with its substantiality, relative substantiality, breaks through, and it shines into the kalim of bia, in the lower worlds, bia, yitzira, and asiya. It's the same light as is in Atzilus, but it's a light which has now gone through curtains and layers and layers and layers. So the actuality of the light is not held in our hand. The effect of the light is held in everything. The infinite, again, the Ein Sof is responsible ultimately for everything. That's the perspective we have, that there's nothing but Hashem. Ein od milvado, there's nothing besides him. However, our experience is that there are things other than he, i.e. the pen that I threw on the table and the world of that large and the worlds above and above. So that's because that light is becoming thickened. That's the word, the thickening of the light, even though it is the light that came from Atzilus, but in a thicker manifestation in the lower worlds. Is another technical language. So this beam of light itself becomes enclosed at its end in what's called Nehi the Adam Kadmor, the Netzach, Hod, and Yesod of the supernal man. Okay, the supernal man. We see it all, Adam Kadmor. What's the supernal man? Supernal man. So let's just we'll make it very simple. We have the ayin, nothing, which is everything, right? Starts coming down and down and down until there's a beam, this huge repository of unformed light gets narrowed into a beam, which is called the kav. And that kav breaks through into a whole different set of reality, which is what we call, and that breakthrough of that beam is called the Tzimtzum Harishon, the first big contraction, the first big condensation. And that gives rise to a recapitulation of all the 10 spheros, but now at a much more tangible, although we're not down to anything physical yet, way far from anything physical, but something more tangible configuration of the spheros, and that's called Adam Kadmon. Shehu Seif Ragle HaYosher Shaloi. That's the feet, like the feet of before Atzilus, bottom becomes the top or the crown of the world of Atzilus. Right? Malchus of the upper world in her regnancy as a queen with a crown gives birth to the lower world. And that becomes Ragle HaYosher Shalei, the feet, so to speak, of the bottom of the 613 configuration up above. Amastayemis b'malchus ve'etzia, and this goes through a recapitulating process all the way down until malchus of Asiya, until you get to the womb, and the birth, which gives birth to the womb, gives birth to the world of Asiya, the spiritual world of Asiya, in which we live in the physical part of the world of Asiya. So the light of the Kav radiates from there, from its original source in the Tzimtzum Harishon, the first condensation of a real heavy condensation of light, so that it can be appropriately further brought into particularization down below. And this ha'or of the kab, me'ira mishom, it shines from there, umislabeshes be'or hanashama, the yud sevirus the and becomes invested in the light of the soul of the lower worlds, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, Shehi Elakus, Shehu Elakus, which is godliness. In other words, godliness flows from Etzem, right? This is another expression, Etzem v'hispashtus. From the essential, it spreads out. And a ray of a ray of a ray comes all the way down into the lower worlds, Afghan, Bichol, and even the Kalim Shalahem, and also the vessels from him. That's the thickening, which is called vessels. And this ray of a ray of a ray is in every creature created, Bria, Benoisrim, Yitzira, and every formed thing, Benasim, and everything which exists in the world of Asiya. Meshikosev, as is written in the Pasuk, excuse me, this Pasuk is in Nehemiah, Ayomim Bichol Asher Bohem, the sea, the Yamim, Hayamim, not Hayamim, Hayamim Bichol Asher Bohem, the seas and everything which is in it. Another mashal. The sea, if you stand on the beach, you see nothing, right? But inside, and if you went deeper, you'd see everything, all the fish. So there's another mashal from Ayin is the sea, which shows nothing, but it has in it all the qualities and the environment which nurture and give rise to all the little fishies and other things in the sea. So this is the sea and everything within it. The Ato Machaya Eskula, and this is a summation. You God yourself, you, who about which we can say nothing, and from whom everything is nothing is concealed. You are Atem Kulam, Ato Machaya, you enliven everything. The Kol Zois Bibikinis is Pashtus, and all of this process of him enlivening everything we call his pashtus, his spreading out. That's another of the ways of etzem to his pashtus. There's an etzem, an essence, which spreads out. And this chayas spreads out, a chayas l'hachayesin, and that becomes the life force which enlivens everything. And that's yesterday's and today's Igeres HaKodesh, holy letter. Hopefully, you got it. I mean, we could reduce it all to one word. Etzem v'hispashtus, Gili Helam, revelation from concealment, Koyach U'Poel, potential to actual. That's all roughly equivalent to Yesh Me'ayin. And the most important thing is the ayin, the essence of God, is contained through this process in everything that exists, especially our mitzvahs. All right? Any questions, comments? Mitzvah Shem, think about this. I mean, just one takeaway, since it is Vav Tishrei. This is all about birth. This is all about the feminine quality of from conception to gestation to development to birth. That's one of the mashalim we use, right? And that's what's happening, the birth, ultimately the birth and revelation of Mashiach through the womb of the mother. Okay, see you tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem.